Life has carried on since the first cell uninterrupted. If someone asks you the name of your great ancestor, it is actually just the first cell that developed in some muddy water body. So there has been a direct line, and each of us are direct descendants of that cell. That tells us that bodies keep falling, but there is something that continues without interruption. That is Prakriti. What we call as human beings are just specific shapes, forms that come and go, yet there is something that continues. In fact, it has been posited scientifically that death happens exactly so that life can continue. Death happens so that the ones who have been hanging around since too long, they make way for something new, something fresh. If the old fogies don't make space, then there will be a terrible competition for resources. And in this competition, the oldies will necessarily win precisely because they have been around for too long. They know the rules of the game and the tricks of the trade much better than a newborn or a young one does. The only way the young one can have a reasonable claim to resources is if the old ones first of all get weak and sick so that they can't compete. Ultimately, they must fall off so that the resources become available to the next generation. In this way, the disappearance of the old one is actually necessary for the continuity of life. Life continues. But this continuation is not something that one can easily see. One takes himself as the unit of life. In fact, one takes himself as life itself. Therefore, one believes in life not as a continuity, but in life as discrete units. So death appears like the end of life, not the game of life. And when death appears like the end of life, then there is a lot of suffering. And that suffering is continuous. Well, physically, a death might not be happening every moment. People might not be dropping down every moment. But there is other stuff that is falling apart and disappearing and crumbling every moment. And if that falling apart or crumbling down is not taken as continuation of the game, then there is suffering. One feels something has been lost. One feels there has been a death. Sri Krishna wants to relieve Arjuna of his suffering in two ways. First of all, by showing to him the eternity of Prakriti and the timelessness, secondly, of the Atma. Prakriti is eternal, Atma is timeless. Prakriti is time itself. Therefore, there is no way that it can begin at some point in time or end at some point in time. If Prakriti ends, so does time. Prakriti is eternal, Atma is timeless. Whether you take Prakriti or Atma, one thing is certain. There is nothing called a beginning or an end in time. And it is this misconception that accounts for a lot of our suffering. One arose at a moment, one went away at a moment. The game has continued. It's like a train, a long distance train. Look at the people who boarded it at the starting point. Hardly any of them reach the end point. Think of a train, for example, that runs from Jammu till Kanyakumari over a period of 2 full days. Think of those who board the train at Jammu. How many of them reach Kanyakumari? No? But the train does. People hop in, people hop out. The train keeps moving. And at all points, the train remains either fully or reasonably occupied. We do not envisage a scenario in which the train gets vacant, does it ever? No. 5 people joined in, 5 people left, opted out. The train keeps moving. That's life. That's life. And when the train arrives, you do not say the passengers have arrived. You say the train has arrived. It's the train that counts. So life is not to be seen in discrete units. If you are unattached to the train, you will say the train has arrived. But if Papa is arriving, You'll say, oh, Papa has arrived. Such a huge train. And maybe 800 passengers or more. And the train arrives. And what do you say? Papa has arrived. You're not concerned with the rest of the material. That's attachment. That's when you fail to see the complete picture. The moment there is attachment, you start thinking in terms of persons rather than life itself. You start thinking of persons rather than Prakriti. And that amounts to suffering. It's not at all difficult to see that the train has arrived, right? Or is it? But attachment does not allow you to see the simple and obvious fact, the huge fact of the train. You miss the train because your eyes are looking for Papa. You have missed the train. And the train is huge. Similarly, the facts of life are obvious, but we miss them because we are attached to particulars. We are attached to small, little, petty things. So we miss the composite picture. You getting it? So within the flow of time, there is actually no death if one stops being attached to particulars. And that will be possible only when you first of all stop thinking of yourself as a particular. You will have to look yourself as a wave in the ocean, not as a particular one with an independent existence. The moment you see that, your body, your mind, your sense of self are all Prakriti, it becomes very difficult to still believe in a separation from Prakriti. For me to have an identity as a particular, it is very important to see myself as separate from Prakriti, right? But if you can see that every bit of you is organically related, continuously related to the wider life itself, how will you take yourself as separate, as particular? Possible? Where is your skin color coming from? It's coming from your parents and it's coming from the sun. No? And it's coming from the food you eat. Is it yours? So how do you then believe in particulars? All is organically linked to something else. It's all arriving from somewhere. Right? And when you start seeing by way of self-observation and self-knowledge, every bit of you, every single cell of yours is Prakritic, conditioned, following an ancient logic, which is not yours in particular. It is a general logic. It's a universal logic. Then it becomes very difficult to take yourself as a separate entity. If everything in me corresponds to something outside of me, does there exist anything called me at all? And when this knowledge arises, there is end of suffering, freedom from suffering. How is there freedom from suffering? Because this knowledge is about seeing that there is nobody who exists in particular even to suffer. So how will there be suffering now? There is nobody in particular who can suffer. So the sufferer is gone. How has he gone? The sufferer has realized his own non-existence. If sufferer is gone, how can there be suffering? There will be processes, all right. The process of pain, the process of aging, the process of disease, the process of this, that, what, all the processes that are possible. But there will be nobody to be attached to those processes, raise expectations, hold desires, and then suffer. There will be nobody. You are seeing processes as processes, not something you can gain something from. So freedom from suffering is actually freedom from sufferer. It's not possible to retain the sufferer and yet not suffer. Once the sufferer is gone, what amounted to suffering hitherto becomes just pain. Just pain. Pain translated into suffering in the presence of sufferer. With the sufferer gone, the pain would remain. Pain is a physical thing. Pain is a thing in the material dimension. It remains. But there is nobody to identify with the pain and therefore suffer. You're getting it? How do I identify? I'm not. How do I call myself as unique? Am I? What is unique about me? What is particular about me? The body, the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, the aspirations. What's unique about me? There's nothing unique about me at all. Change my food, my thoughts change. Change my clothes, my thoughts change. Go take a bath, thoughts change. Am I? Am I? No, I'm not. If just standing in the shower can change my disposition, then surely I am not. I look at something, I smell something, thoughts change. Am I? Then who's there to die? Who's there to die? Who's there to die? So on one hand there is life, and life in its totality, which in the absence of knowledge is seen in a fragmented way, and then there is the realization that there is just life and I am not. This is the second thing that does not die, because this realization is independent of all corporeal elements. You are looking at the body, so this realization is not bodily. This does not die. This realization is also what has been called as the true self, Atma, Bodho Aham. Who am I? The one who realizes. This realization is not thought. The thought does not remain. Thought depends on the brain. You smash the brain, thought is gone. What is this realization then? It has to be a cessation. Because what has ceased cannot be seized anymore. Thought is activity, right? Neural activity here. Without that neural activity, there can be no thought. It has become basic science now to connect stuff to your brain, electrodes and all, and just see on a screen how different areas light up on different kinds of thoughts and emotions. You are excited, one area of your brain starts showing activity. You're depressed, some other area starts showing up. Yeah? You're angry, some other part lights up. So all that is activity. If realization too is activity, then realization is dependent on, and then realization can be seen on. They have tried that for long. They wanted to know which part of the brain is responsible for Buddhahood. Because they believe in the material so deeply. They said, whatever this thing called realization or enlightenment or Buddhahood is, it must be residing somewhere in the brain. So they actually went for something called the neuroscience of enlightenment. That what happens in the brain when you get enlightened. Obviously, they could make no progress with that. But if you read up on that, it's quite interesting. I think they are still continuing with this. The information I might be having is around at least a decade old, so it might be dated.
Find people who are so-called enlightened,
and then they
put electrodes on his head.
Right.
Try to make it.
So when I used to be an avid reader till around a decade back, this I found initially fascinating. And then I read up more and found it quite stupid and dropped this area. So I don't really know what has happened over the last 1 decade and what is the latest. But you must read up. I don't even remember all the terms, but there is also a field of study that studies supernatural experiences. So what happens, for example, when you claim that you are hearing divine bells in a spell of meditation? So what exactly happens in the brain at that time? They're trying to study all that. This divine bell thing can be studied because it is something. Because it is something, and whatsoever is something in Prakriti can be scientifically studied. No problems with that. Realization is not something, it is a cessation of something. Something exists, you can study it. How can you study the non-existence of something? This is a pen. Find out its weight, or you can. All right. There is no pen. Find out the weight. How will you find out the weight? Can you? There is something on his eyes. Find out the power of the lens. You can. Find out the power of her lens. Can you? Why? So your lenses are working. This much you can clearly see. Huh? Do you get this? When the thing is gone, how can you suffer for its disappearance anymore? It has been seen as anyway non-existent. Beautifully does Krishna put it to Arjun. You are grieving over those who never existed at all. How can you kill in the first place when they never existed? You are trying to take credit for their death. Such a huge ego you have. As a super warrior, as the mighty archer. I killed them. So you cannot kill them. You cannot kill them because they don't exist. No problem. And what exists cannot be killed. The bacteria, the viruses, for example, they were here long before we came. And after World War III, or after the climate catastrophe, the sixth mass extinction, when human beings will be all gone, would that mean that life itself is gone? Life would still continue. You cannot kill life, Arjun. And the ones you are killing are just waves in the ocean. Why do you hold yourself accountable and responsible for that? Something as silly as that. And mind you, you have no power to kill life itself. Even if you wipe out that entire army in front of you, still life would continue. Things roll on. What are you grieving for? Just that you take yourself as too important. So you take others too as important. So you think there would be a mighty dent. If you are gone. Nothing changes. There is this one thing that doesn't change, and the other thing that you cannot kill is the realization that there is nothing to be killed. What can you do to zero to reduce it to zero? Life, in one sense, is eternal, so you cannot kill it. And when it comes to the truth, it is not approachable, not touchable. So what can you do to it to kill it? Not possible. So you are needlessly grieving. Your grief is born out of your ignorance. Once you start seeing the nature of things, it becomes more and more difficult to grieve over anything. How does one live then? Why does one live? What to live for? There is nothing in the conventional sense that one then lives for. To have a purpose is to first of all presume a suffering self. Only the sufferer can have a purpose. So there is no personal purpose possible for someone who has started seeing through the veil. But yes, one purpose can possibly remain, not necessarily. There are these other bodies around you who are needlessly suffering. They too have the potential to come to the stage of joyful light freedom, but they are needlessly suffering. So that can translate into a possible purpose. A purpose that some people have espoused, and there have been others who have refused to take up even that purpose. Krishna here is in a role in a particular avatar in which he says, yes, an impersonal purpose is what I choose to have. Why does he do that? No reason. No reason. Just like suffering, reason is a word applicable only to those who still are carrying a personal ego, the sufferer. So if you ask, why doesn't Krishna just see all this as a mirage, as a bubble, and simply let the game continue as it would? Why can't he just say, Arjun, let me turn the chariot towards the forest and leave the fools to quarrel among themselves? Let the two of us go and have fun in the forest. He could have done that. He could have done that and still remained Krishna. Nothing would have been found diminished in him. He wouldn't have reduced to a lower figure had he chosen to do that. He could have said, no, forget. No Gita. Let's just go and play in the jungle. Let the fool have all the property and everything. It anyway does not mean anything, so let him walk away with all the goodies. Krishna could have said that. Why does he not say that? Depends. Depends on what? Depends on Krishna. Depends on Krishna. This time he's in a mood to just help out the little ones. At other points in other avatars, the mood might be to leave things to their fate. So here he wants to help. He says all these are suffering and I want to help. That's the only purpose that can possibly remain with the one who is not existent for himself. Possibly this purpose can remain. I do not exist for myself. But since there is this body, and the body would run its course, 10, 20, 40 years, whatever. So just to, have a good time, I have decided to help others out. For no other fancy or noble reason. No divine purpose. Just as a good pastime. Because you see, just as I am not going to clamor for a long life, similarly, I am not going to commit suicide. The body is there and the body will keep rolling as long as it has to. Which means that I am probably going to have some years. What to do with those years? Earn money, do this, do that. Now the problem is, for whom? I am not, so earn money for whom? Something has to be done with this time. Just as, to avoid boredom. Why does Krishna instruct Arjuna in the Gita? To avoid boredom? No other reason, really. Krishna would have remained Krishna. He could have continued to sit as the charioteer and swat the flies. He would still have remained Krishna. Nothing would have changed within him. When the chooser is sublime, all choices are equal to each other, no? Are they not? Or will we compare one choice with the other and say, this action of yours was good, but that was not? Such statements apply only to people with fragmented egos. When you are crystallized within, then whatever you do comes from the same center. Therefore, whatever you do has the same level. How can one action be better than the other? So Krishna could have chosen to swat flies. That action would have been exactly comparable in its nobility to the discourse of Gita. But he says, fine, let me. With no personal interest involved. With no real disappointment involved if Arjun refuses to listen or understand. So Krishna is giving it everything that he has without having any stake in what happens as a result of his efforts. Pitiable position. Most beautiful position. Pitiable because he is giving everything in spite of having no stake in the game. As they say, no skin in the game. From the worldly perspective, this is so pitiable. You are putting in so much, investing so much, whereas you can get nothing because there is nobody to receive anything. So the worldly man will say, oh, pathetic. A pathetic state. He is investing so much when possibly he can get no returns from it. No benefit can accrue to Krishna from the Gita. Do you see that? The Gita can at most help Arjun. And after Arjun, millions like us, billions like us. But can the Gita help Krishna? No. Krishna has no stakes. Yet he is putting in everything. Seen from one place, this is horrible. So much efforts you are putting in. And you very well know the rule of the game is such that you can get nothing for yourself from this. Yet you are trying so hard. But this is also the most beautiful way of living. not a measured way, where you give with an eye on the returns. If you operate in a measured way, you will never get the immeasurable. And therefore, this way is the way of beauty. You fling yourself 100% into the action. When it has been ascertained in advance that no personal benefit can accrue to it from any of it, accrue to you from any of it. Are you getting it? The Gita touches upon the core anxiety of human beings. And that's why it has been such an important document. The Gita touches upon death. Whatever we do, in some sense, is driven by the fear of death. The ego center can also be called as the fear center. And there is no fear that is not rooted in death. So the ego center can also be called as the death center. Whatever we do, it finds motivation and energy from death. We function to somehow avoid death in some way or the other. Gross way, subtle way, this way, that way, whatever. You'll be amazed to know how much is being invested in prolonging the maximum lifespan of human beings. Not the average life expectancy that has already probably come close to the point of saturation. From antiquity till around 150 years back, the average lifespan of human beings hovered around the 30 years mark. And then boom, with advances in medical technology, certain areas of the world have already exceeded 80. Others are approaching 80. We are close to saturation. So now we are trying to figure out how to increase the denominator itself, which is the maximum number possible that can be attained if you are not crushed under a truck. Death has been the driver, the motivator. And that's why Gita is so important. Gita takes the central issue of death head on. What is death? To whom does death occur? It's a beautiful thing to explore. We don't even know for sure the precise moment of death. We have not been able to come to a sharp definition. You can never precisely tell whether a person is dead. I read of a curious case. There was one woman who was declared dead in one province of the US, because there the laws probably said that you are dead if your heart stops functioning. So the doctors declared her dead. Her parents or others who were around her, they found a way out. They said there is another province that says you are dead only when you are brain dead. So even though the doctors there had declared her dead, they brought her to the other place and she managed to live for a few years. Not sure of the details. Probably if you search for this case, you'll get something. We don't even know when a fellow has actually died. Just as we don't know when a fellow actually becomes conscious and therefore can be called as born. We very well know that birth is not something that happens when you emerge from the mother's body. If you can be called as living only after you emerge from the mother's body, then abortion would not be a crime in so many countries. You are obviously taken as alive even when you are in the mother's womb. But there is no way to exactly know when you can be called as alive in the mother's womb. So death and birth both are fuzzy affairs. We don't know when we are born, we don't know when we die. And that can never be known because actually we never take birth and actually we never die. It will never be possible to exactly say this. 4 hours, 28 minutes, 37.3 seconds. That's the moment of death. You'll never be able to say that. It's a movement, it's a process. It's a process. It's a continuous function, not a discrete one. What is a continuous function? Like a ramp, slope. What's a discrete function? Like a stair. Life and death are related in a continuity. You're never fully dead and you're never fully alive. Which means life and death are actually one. It's a matter of ignorance to think of someone as alive and think of the other as dead. It's just an apparent change in state. And that's the reason why things that appear alive are able to come forth from things that appear dead. And that's why things that appear alive sooner or later become things that appear dead. So Arjun, what are you grieving over? Who's going to die? Who's going to die? For death, there must be somebody to die. For death, there must be somebody who took birth. The one who is alive is not going to die. Who is alive? Whatever you want to call it, the DNA, the genes, the genome. That's the thing doing the journey. And that has been doing the journey since eternity. And the journey will continue. If not through one organism or one species, then through other species, other organisms. And even if all the organisms and all the species vanish, the soil would still remain, right? And just as the first organism arose from the soil itself, not from parents, but from soil. Just as the first organism arose from the soil, similarly, if all the apparent life is gone, life would again spring from soil. We have seen 5 mass extinctions till now, have we not? Life returns. And we are only talking of our tiny planet. There is just no reason to assume that in this almost infinitely vast universe, there won't be other places where sentience of some kind would be existing. Life keeps returning. Arjun, what are you wailing over? And take my cue. Just as I have nothing to be concerned about, yet I'm working to relieve your suffering. Similarly, fight the war to relieve your population of its suffering. Having seen that life is purposeless for you because you are selfless. Selfless not in the terms of the opposite of selfish. Selfless, not existent. Once you are selfless, life is purposeless. Then the only purpose that can voluntarily remain is the purpose to bring others to purposelessness. And you see me exercising that option, Arjun, right? With you. I have no stakes in educating you. Have I? No, nothing. Personally, I get nothing from teaching you all these things. Yet I am striving for your sake. Similarly, you fight for the sake of the people of Hastinapur. I get nothing by teaching you. Similarly, you fight even though you must know that you will get nothing by fighting. And then there is beauty in the fight. You very well know in advance you will get nothing from that fight. And still you fight with all that you have. And in the most intense way you can. So beautiful. Are you getting it? Think of it. What is death? You are gone. Huh? And you have opted for organ donation. How is it that you have gone and your organs continue to live? What kind of death is this? And so many of your organs are still alive. You know, even skin can be transplanted. Skin, eyes, everything. As science advances, probably every bit of your body can be put into some other body. Now tell me who has died. Tell me who has died. Every part of you is still alive. Then who has died? Your teeth. Huh? My teeth have gone to him. My hair, whatever I have of them, have gone to her. My nose has gone to him. My eyes have come to you. Liver to him, kidneys to him, heart to him. He is roaming around with my intestines. If everything is still alive, who has died? Please tell me. Ship of Theseus. Who has died? So that's what death is. Just an appearance. You know what? When they take you for cremation, even several hours after death, so much of you is still alive. It's actually some kind of wastage just putting that body to ashes. Because a lot of you is potentially still usable. But we just incinerate that and everything is reduced to ashes. Who has died? Sandeep is now 100% sure. The way he is looking at me. Nobody in that sense ever dies because there is nobody. There is no particular one. How can then any particular one die? Sandeep, your nose has been the nose of 40,500 other creatures before you. You know what? This is a thing that others have been wearing for long. And from them it has come to you, and now you have put it on. Raghav is generally trying to be curious. He's saying, all those things will go to these people. He will get the teeth, she will get the hair. Okay, you will get what you desperately lack. My brain belongs to him. Or is there other stuff that you would rather have? But not quite mentionable? So it's a beautiful discourse in evolution. It has survived time, it has survived the march of science because it is absolutely scientific. Else, the march of science would have trampled over the Gita. Just as so many other beliefs and documents and scriptures have been reduced to obscurity by the advancement of science and technology, Gita too would have been thrown into oblivion. No. It has managed to not just survive but thrive. Why? Because what is being said here is not some religious injunction. It is the core of science, all science. This is eugenics, this is genetics. Okay, figure out what is gerontology. This is all that. Without obviously a mention of those fancy terms. This is all that. If you do not understand all this, in fact, you have to understand molecular biology as well. If you do not understand all this, you cannot say what Krishna is saying. And the beautiful part is that all this knowledge has come to him not through a research lab, but just through observation of life. That's the power of observation. And that's also the basis of the scientific method, observation. Observation can yield to you tremendous insights, sometimes even without the use of cutting-edge equipment. This is the equipment. This is the cutting-edge equipment. Sometimes this can reveal to you just detached observation, dispassionate observation. This can reveal to you what would otherwise come through after decades of research in an advanced lab. The difference is, in the lab, when the conclusions would be drawn, they would be supported by ample verifiable proof. But when you get it through observation, it is very subjective and you are the only proof. So there is a risk, huge risk. Nevertheless, in spite of the risk, it is possible to come to those observations, those conclusions, insights. Another insight about death. Is it possible for a single human being to exist? Just one? Impossible. How easy is it for just two human beings to exist? Next to impossible now. Let's say a man and a woman. Next to impossible, but still they can somehow make it. Now let's assume there are just 10 people on the planet. How difficult would it be for them to survive? Very difficult. Similarly, it is difficult for a single cell to survive. That's why the entire body exists as an aggregation of cells. And within this aggregation, death is always happening. Just as in a city or in a country or in a locality, death is always happening, right? But we never say, oh, the city has died. Do we say that? Similarly, in your body, cells are all the time dying. All the time dying. But you do not say, you have died. Similarly, you are a cell in the wider organism, in the body of the wider organism called Prakriti. If you die, has anybody died? You just brush your hair. At least 100 cells, if not more, die. Nobody has died. Will you say you have died? Similarly, you are just one cell in the bigger body of Prakriti. When you die, nobody has died. There are many ways to approach the situation. You have been sitting here. Do you realize how many cells within you have died in the duration of this session itself? Now, one of those cells starts weeping like Arjun. What would you tell her? Come on, I'm alive. I'm alive. Who has died? You anyway don't matter. You have no individuality. Does a cell have individuality? No. But the cell might get deluded and start thinking that it has individuality, and then the cell would suffer. In the scheme of life, in the wider scheme of life, death is not just inevitable, but actually necessary. Death means progress. Evolution happens through death. It's a great disease if your old cells refuse to die, you know. You'll be finished off. Cycle advances. It's the way of Prakriti. Are you carrying even a single cell that you had at the time of your so-called birth? Next to none. Then who are you? The one who took birth is no more there. Who are you? You are born with X cells, right? None of those X cells exist today. Two things. One, who is alive? Because the one who was born is already long gone. None of those X cells exist today. Second, you couldn't have become this big had those cells not gone. It was necessary for them to go so that you could become this. Had those cells remained, the ones that you were born with as a baby, you wouldn't have reached this position. They had to go so that you could become this. That is one thing. Secondly, if all those cells are gone, who are you? And the cells that you are having today, huh? Just a few weeks from today, most of them will be gone. A few months from today, maybe 95% of them will be gone. And a few years from today, probably all of them will be gone. So who are you?